Welcome to the Intelligence Briefing Live, What's the Buzz, where leaders and hands-on experts share how they have turned hype into outcome. Today, we'll talk about managing your automation risk. And, who better to talk to about it than someone who's actually built a framework around it? Ralph Diaz. Ralph, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Andreas. Very glad to be here and very excited about starting this conversation on risk. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, I know many people in the audience know you from your memes on LinkedIn, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So apart from being funny, I'm actually quite serious. Yeah. So, or I was serious, not anymore. But now, I mean, probably my entire career was very much in the risk and compliance, space. Having started my career in Big Fours, really managing large projects around IT risk, security, very much focused initially on large-scale ERP deployment, where I was managing the security really aspect of these deployments. And then really slowly but surely, I start moving into really a more automation-driven role, where pretty much I was looking around how to modernize risk and compliance in general, yeah. And also helping business functions also start getting the most out of automation in all the sense of the words, from all the possible spectrum, hardcore automation up to really UI automation. But really, I started getting that role when I was in my previous employer, a large pharma company, and I've been tasked really to run initially this whole program, really actually starting the program, which was the difficult part around aligning all stakeholders, putting in place the operating model. And as part of that work, well, I had to deal really with the risk and compliance element around how to ensure that ultimately everything we deploy at speed always is kind of governed and managed and monitored appropriately, specifically when you operate in a highly regulated industry. So I spent maybe 50% of my time dealing with compliance. Yeah, the technical part was easy, but it's pretty much making sure that all the risk and compliance function from first line, second line, even our external auditors are actually happy with the way we're going to manage really the risk around this whole initiative. So that's where really maybe I become an expert in risk around automation. and yeah.
That's awesome. Hey man, it really sounds like you've seen quite a lot from a lot of different angles. And I think, to your point, if you've done it in pharma, in a regulated industry, yeah, then then you for sure know the ins and outs.
You suffer a lot.
Yes, exactly. So maybe point to the audience. So if you're just joining the stream, please drop a comment in the chat. What's one risk you typically see in automation projects, just so we get the dialogue a little going, and we'll pick up on those comments. But as usual, maybe Ralph, question to you as well. Should we play a little game to kick things off?
Yes, absolutely. Let's go. Probably it's going to be a meme, so I'm expecting a picture.
Yeah, right. So let's play a game, and this one's called Caption That. So when I hit the buzzer, you'll see a picture appearing on the screen. I'd like to caption it with the first thing that comes to mind and why. So caption that. But to make it even more interesting, you'll only have 60 seconds for your answer. Wow. So, right. And for those of you watching us live, drop your answer and why in the chat as well. I'm sure there'll be some good ones. So Ralph, are you ready for What's the Buzz?
Yeah, that's a tough challenge. Yeah, let's go.
Perfect. Then let's go. 60 seconds.
60 seconds. So what do I see here? So I see an old van carrying portable toilets. Nice. A bridge, shiny car. Yeah, I mean, this to be honest, this can be captioned a bit if I look about the automation initiatives and how many have run that. You can just caption it as, garbage in, garbage out, for the simple reason that I can see an old van carrying those processes or whatever garbage in there, which is the legacy process, trying actually to automate the as-is process exactly the way they are, and hitting that wall or hitting the fan or hitting the bridge. Yeah, I'm gonna be polite, but hitting hitting the fan, and you can see that everything like all the garbage fall out on maybe the shiny automation leader that just came in, trying to have quick wins. Yeah, but long story short is garbage out in the sense that don't lift and shift anything that you have, your processes, when you know you have those inefficiencies. Just try to go fast, just to have quick wins, and then you can see the damage you can have. Yeah. I mean, the shit hit the fan. In that case, the shit hit the bridge.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great to see that mind of yours working in action and under pressure. So some good comments here as well, from bad hair day to high probability of a storm, old new IT, COE supporting a UI-based RPA automation. So, oh yeah. Thank you so much, both to you, Ralph, as well as to those of you in the audience. Perfect. So with that icebreaker out of the way, I mean, you've already shared it. Your background is in risk and in compliance. And one of my favorite frameworks is a decision tree that I've seen you have created, and it's all about risk. And I know you've posted that a while ago. For anyone that hasn't seen it yet, maybe can you describe some of the core points of it and some of the key risks that somebody should clarify, or that one should clarify before starting an automation project?
Absolutely. And I think it's quite simple. Yeah. And again, those are high level risk. I'm not going to go really cover the technical risk. Certainly, I'm not going to go that way. But it's a framework that allow really to maybe calm sometimes your ambition. I know that when there is automation, some people are very ambitious and they want to automate everything suddenly. Everything that didn't work, automation is not going to really solve that magically. Yeah. So it's just a framework really to understand that when you have a use case, really, what do you want to automate and to what extent? That's probably the first question you ask. And every use case, it's about, for me, a type of automation. You have use cases that are very heavily driven around automation to extract, transform information, which is already quite big when you start mixing structured, semi-structured, and structured data. That's by itself, it's a project. Yeah. But some automation can be very much focused on, you already have all those connectors from off-the-shelf systems. So you don't really need to build that kind of automation, but you might need to inject way more automation around the analysis. And that's, again, another type of automation where you will bring certain tools and really try to have the analysis as a key use case for automation. And obviously it evolves. Yeah. Once you extract, analyze, there is this additional step, which is way more complex by nature, because that's where you really start using some cognitive intelligence here, because you need to take decision on the back of some information analysis. And that decision sometimes can be very easy. Yeah. Black or white, binary, A or B, or can be super complex because you need to take a lot of contextual elements into your decision-making process. And last, really, when you take that decision, you need to implement a decision. And that's what, for me, it's an automation driven on action, being able to go and implement or trigger an action that will go into any backend system, do some activities, but really it's the end for me, the automation. So long story short, for me, any use case have at least one of those 4 types of automation. If you have the four of them, perfect. You're trying to go end-to-end automation. Yeah. If you have 1 or 2, you're trying to maybe partially automate something and leave the rest for the human to do it. So I think then when you have these in mind, exactly what type of automation you are trying to do, that's where you come around, okay, to what extent I'm going to actually automate? Am I going to have a low level of automation, which is still highly dependent on human? Or are you going to go the other side of spectrum, where you are actually saying, you know what, it's going to be pretty much full-blown automation, where some automation is going to pretty much do the information acquisition, analysis, decision-making, action implementation in a fully autonomous way. Yeah. And it depends exactly what you want here. But then, obviously, the first answer is I want to go like full automation, but it's not simple. Yeah. Because it depends on a lot of factors. And here again, you start hitting some risk that you need to take into account, because of the complexity of the data you're trying to get into the automation workflow, or because also of the criticality of the process, where you can't really afford to be so highly automated because you might have risk. So talking about the risk, this funnel of risk allow you to maybe just conceptualize whatever use case you have, whatever automation type you want to enable, whatever automation level you want to reach. Then you start asking some key questions. And the first one will be, really, what's the risk of negative outcome of automation? Yes, automation, obviously the happy path is that it always works, always going to deliver something amazingly fast without any human intervention. But what happened when something bad happened? And actually, to be honest, big, large project automation tend of fail kind of on a periodic basis, with obviously recovery operations on the back, but automation fail, like a human fail, And I think you need to understand the importance of what's the impact of those failure, and is it aligned with your risk appetite? When you have an automation, let's say managing a financial closing process, and suddenly it fails during the monthly closure, what's going to be the risk of that if you cannot actually recover quickly? Well, maybe very high, because you cannot really report your finance. So that's maybe one question. You're saying, you know what, I'm not going to be aspiring from reaching such high level of automation, so I'm going to recalibrate a bit my initial ambition and inject a bit of human in the middle here to actually ensure that this operation is conducted almost without any problem. That's a negative outcome. I think it's big for me. You have the technology deployment. Yes, you want to do amazing stuff around unstructured data. Is the technology ready? Do you have the necessary skills from a project mode, from a BAU activity, to actually being able to maintain such a complex technology? And that's also something to take into account. I think some companies want to do a lot, but when you realize the effort that you need to put in order to be able to maintain a technology structure is not easy anymore. You need experts, you need to pay for it. Risk of user adoption, obviously, that's the biggest one. You have an amazing automation, but there is a kind of resistant a change management process that's not happening well, and you have pretty much a rejection of automation. And this can take many forms. I'm not going to drill down in this one. Happy to take a question, but also I've explored a lot around what do we mean by rejection and into which context. And one important, really, I think specifically when you try to automate a mission critical activity, I think it's the risk of situation awareness. Human, even if you monitor and you outsource this monitoring function to many human, which needs to be 24/7 follow the sun monitoring, that you still have a bit more control, to be honest. And these humans are still very much aware around procedures, how they run it. When there is an environmental changes, they can quickly recalibrate. Not as easy as an automation when you need to go through the entire change management design process and push that back into production. I think it's way more easy for a human really to be aware of any situational change. And I think that when you have automation, there is a lot of issue around pushing everything into automation, not having any more human really fully in the loop. And then when something bad happen again, these humans are unable to recover those operations. Even if you have a handbook, even if during your project you keep your SOP, if humans are not trained, if humans don't actually manage those processes on a daily basis, they're going to lose the situational awareness. Even if there is a failure, they're going to take a lot of time to recover. And risk of reliability. I think for me also that's a big risk when you have automation that move into really the complexity of cognitive automation, relying on a lot of data, structured, unstructured, and taking data of multiple data sources, internal and external. You start having also a reliability risk. What happened actually if this automation fail, or how can I trust that automation? And sometimes to be able to audit a certain algorithm or ensure that post project these algorithms remain consistent, structured, and complete and accurate. That also it's a lot of work. It's not like you unleash something and then it's going to work forever. So being able to continuously rely on automation, it's a big exercise in terms of people, expert that needs to be always there to ensure that reliability level. So these are really a bunch of risk. I have more risk, but if you think, and the framework is around 12 risk, that 12 high level risk that I've called out. These are, I mentioned 4 or 5. But yeah, automation is complex. There are going to be those kind of risk, but risk can be mitigated. Yeah, I'm not saying, oh, these risks are here, let's stop everything, and you know what, let's go back to everything human, manual. It's amazing. Absolutely not. I think first of all, your initial aspiration can be recalibrated so that you have a bit more human involvement. But if you still want to aspire for high level of automation, you need to put in place mitigating control, remediation actions, a lot of monitoring activities, yeah, which needs to be in place to ensure ultimately that those risks are always under control. And monitoring activity, the more also you monitor, your monitoring activities are automated by nature, well, the more you're going to be able to place reliance on the model also. So I'm not saying remediate automation by putting more automation, but monitoring needs to be in place so that you ensure that all those risks are always under acceptable level and really are aligned with your risk appetite ultimately as an organization.
So Ralph, I think that's a great point you're making, right? Risks will always be there, but it's a matter of how you plan for them, how you plan for their mitigation, and that you're aware of them in the first place, that they do exist, and that you make a conscious decision to what extent you're able to, or able and willing to accept those risks. And I think a framework like the one that you described, and I'm sure people can look it up on LinkedIn or other sources as well. It's great to have, and it's great to share, and maybe many of us will glance over it if we see it on social media, and just glancing over it, I feel is a shame, because there's so much depth and so much relevance here. I'm curious, where have you applied it, or what would be one use case that you can share where you've applied it, and how has it helped in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I've applied really initially I would say, if I take the RPA example, yeah, I think part of my job initially was in my previous employer was really to deploy RPA, yeah, and obviously the big use cases were on processes that require a lot of human intervention, actually managed by service provider that we have outsourced somewhere, and also kind of from a compliance perspective, those were also processes where a lot of audit findings, a lot of process errors were actually there that cost quite a lot initially. And these are initially big cases for us around, let's go and hit those processes. Let's ensure that maybe a process that have a bunch of SOX controls in there that have failed previously because of the human issues, not being able to run the control properly. That happened a lot. So let's have automation to actually run a process and at the same time run those controls, which was a big win-win from an operational perspective and a compliance perspective. Yeah. So, and again, we start hitting the finance processes, and I was talking about the financial closing process, super important process that takes information from multiple systems, SAP included, then consolidate all of these, put it in another system, and then having a lot of manual step around that. And yes, we realized that quickly that initially it was all structured data. So the case was like, well, super simple. Yeah, you don't have anything to worry about. You're not going to bring intelligence and additional tech to actually deliver the outcome. But then we realized that, yeah, the steps are there. You can't really rationalize, optimize those steps. You can't remove one. You can't eliminate any step. These are very procedural regulated steps that you need to follow. So ultimately we went through the funnel and we start understand and we realized that, you know what, if this happen, if suddenly the bot doesn't run on the certain frequency, even if we put a trigger and the trigger doesn't really connect back to the RPA control room because of a connectivity issue, whatever, yeah, but there was so many issues what could go wrong in the process, then initially you say, you know what, a very simple process, which actually when you bring into the RPA selection process matrix that we have, when you put a lot of numbers, etc., and then you say amazing for automation. Yeah, it was amazing for automation, but this tool didn't took into factor the risk that this could have on a highly regulated industry, not being able actually to work when it has to work, and when it fails, not being able to recover, because you can't recover this. In order to be able to actually go back into an SAP table that is actually critical by nature, you need to absolutely have a credential first in the privileged access management system. So you need to be a trained user. Then once you have it, you need to jump on the privileged access, elevate your access, log in into the instance. It was huge. So initially we said, so we had ambitious to actually to do pretty much full automation, but you know what? We're just gonna have partial automation, extraction of X and Y, Z, sending this to human reviewing, sense check, validity check, and then always human inputting back this into the consolidation system manually. But obviously, with RPA having done a lot of swivel chair around taking data, putting it bad, well, etc., and then themselves really ultimately a human loading the final template into the consolidation and reporting system. But again, what? Because of a risk and the appetite that we didn't want to do, even if the automation was achievable and feasible without having to do anything fancy, but the risk was too high.
I think that's a very important point, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate that as well. I remember, a couple of years ago, we were hearing a lot about lights out finance and autonomous procurement and these kinds of buzzwords and aspirations and visions. So I feel it's very grounding as well to hear from you. Hey, we've aspired to accomplish this, but then when we've looked at the risks and we've weighed the pros and cons and the impact in our industry, in our business, we've actually made a conscious decision not to go that far and to stop a little sooner, but still have that human in the loop. I think that's the other component that I feel is very important. Also, then in those automation programs.
No, absolutely, and I think it's always very easy to say that when automation fail, we have a very well-written contingency plan with steps where we have speedy recovery, etc. Yeah, but that's I don't buy that specifically when you have a complex process. Yes, you have an amazing contingency plan, recovery steps. Yeah, these needs to be done by people. Yeah, ultimately, this is run by a support function somewhere outsourced, so that you rely again on people on a 24/7 shift. So yeah, it's very simple to say we have a recovery. Don't worry, it's baked on it. Some processes you can't even rely on contingency book and recovery steps, because you know that there is a big risk that the human who's going to be actually those operations is not going to be trained enough. He's not going to be there in a timely manner. So it's great to always think about what happened if the automation failed. Yes, we have processes to recover, but if you bake in the risk again and the risk is critical, you don't even want to go that way. You stop there. Yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So I see we're already a bit over time. Yes. So maybe let's summarize. What I'm taking away from our conversation is, yes, do absolutely take a look at the risk framework. Again, I can only recommend. I really love what you've put together and how you've described it just now as well. There's so many different risks, and we've only touched on 4 or 5 of them. But to get this 360-degree view of automation, and on one hand, what is possible when we all get excited about it, but let's also be realistic of where some of the limitations are and to what extent our business and our industry is willing to take on that risk.
Absolutely.
Right. So, folks, we're getting close to the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Ralph, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing you next time around for another round of the intelligence briefing. What's the buzz?
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Andreas. Thanks everyone who joined.
Thanks. Bye-bye.